the great, mighty, and awesome one, the one above all. Father, we are so grateful that you've seen fit to bring us here again today. Father, thank you for sustaining us through the week and allowing us to come back. I thank you, Father, for Eric, and I ask you, Father, that his message go out, and just as your word goes out and not returns void, Father, I pray the same thing for all those who will hear, and may eyes be open and ears be open, Father, in your name. So awesome to be here. Thank you, Father. Amen.
All right, we'll see you in a little bit.
Okay, so this here is the 9th hour. So this week would be hours 9 and 10 of the Wisdom of Solomon series. I would expect that if normally someone was going to hear a talk, a lecture or something about the wisdom of Solomon, you'd be actually talking about the things Solomon said. So you can go to Ecclesiastes, you can go to Proverbs, you could maybe even, I think he wrote a couple of the Psalms, and read his words and discuss those matters. And I've intentionally not done that because that would be what I would expect to be a typical way of, well, the wisdom of Solomon. What did Solomon have to say? And I'm not trying to do that. If any of you want to know about that, there's plenty of resources online. I'm sure there's books written, I would imagine, where you could just look it up. As a matter of fact, I looked up a couple subjects, and one of the sites that comes up is spelled Chabad, Chabad. Well, it's actually pronounced Chabad, and that's a let's just say a Jewish organization. Chabad is an acronym. It's Het, Bet, Dalet, 3 letters, Chabad, and they give the, you might say, the default vowel sound of ah in between the Het, Bet, and the Bet, Dalet. So it's ch, ah, ba, ah, da, Chabad. And if you gave the vowel sound at the end of the D sound, it would be Chabada. But just that's the way the language works. Well, those 3 letters stand for Chakma, Bina, and Da'at. So that group literally is named wisdom, understanding, and knowledge. Only written, you see it written Chabad. You wouldn't know otherwise. Well, if you look on that site, they'll tell you things about Solomon, things about the wisdom of Solomon, and they elaborate because they've got centuries of rabbis who love looking into these matters. This idea of what is wisdom, how is wisdom used or applied, what is human, I could call it human agency. What is the human being's connection with this thing called wisdom? That's kind of what my perspective is today at this particular hour, number 9 here, to discuss. So I looked online, as I said, under wisdom, definition of wisdom, because I had a friend read something from online. I don't know where she got it the other day, and it was really an interesting take. And I thought, well, I'll just punch up the word, what is wisdom, define wisdom, and see what comes up right out of the gate on the internet. And it says, wisdom is the soundness of an action or a decision with regard to the application of experience, the knowledge and good judgment. Knowledge of what? Knowledge of the situation that you're facing, knowledge of the various factors that are involved with the thing you're dealing with. Well, what's any of this got to do with spirituality? The soundness of an action or decision. I've heard it said that if you ask people in jail, they'll say, well, why did you make the decision to do what you did to get you in here? And they all have the same answer. Seemed like a good idea at the time. It seemed like a good idea at the time. That's the answer that most people give you that are either in jail or in the hospital for some sort of crazy accident. And then, I mean, they've got all these what's called fail videos. Man, you watch some of those things and it's like, how do people survive some of these things without being totally busted up for the rest of their life? It seemed like a pretty good idea. You know, it seemed like if we just try to do these acrobatic things or do these tricky things on ladders with chainsaws, which I myself have done, because it's like, yeah, nothing's going to happen. I do construction work, and I've heard it said that the two, you might say, matters or two factors that are involved in most accidents are ladders and chainsaws. I've seen ladders go out from people. I've had ladders go out from under me, extension ladders, and well, even you might call them A-frame ladders. And it's like, why? It's like, because you know they're not going to fall, except they do. And it's like, oh man. So what would be the most prudent thing to do? If I can remember this story properly, I was there quite a few years ago. There was I think it was called AFC, Americans for a Safe Israel or something. Anyway, there was a political meeting here in Portland, America and Israel. There's Israeli diplomats there, Jewish community, and then I think maybe it was Christian representation or something. But the governor of Oregon was there, Kitzhaber, and he said something about, I forget exactly what the subject, but it was like, how do we find a way to make things work? And after his talk, I'm trying to remember the details. Sorry here. Anyway, after his talk, I found I was actually standing right next to him. He was talking to somebody else. And I said, you know, I would suggest that the best way to make things work is to invoke the attention of the Almighty to intervene, his, you might say, to have his face turn upon our matters. Ask him to attend to these things. And he said, well, I'm looking for a little bit more pragmatic option. And I said, it's the most pragmatic thing to do. It's just like, what? It's like pragmatism, or prudent, I can't remember which. George Bush the first used to say, wouldn't be prudent. Dana Carvey would do an imitation of George Bush. Wouldn't be prudent. Prudent and pragmatic, if it's not the synonym of the word chachma for wisdom, it certainly is Shaquille. So the word Shaquille, and the easy way to remember that is like, hey, Shaquille O'Neal, the basketball player, he was a really large guy and really talented. And that word Shaquille is the word for, another word for wisdom, but it also means clever, ingenious, and it means to place something crosswise. Well, if you're stacking bricks, you know that if you stack them all on top of each other, when they get to a certain height, yeah, they're going to tip over and land on your foot and break your foot and cause you pain. And that's not very prudent, pragmatic. But if you put 2 bricks this way, then 2 bricks that way, then 2 bricks this way, and 2 bricks that way, you can get quite a stack, especially if you make that out of a bigger base. And if you build something like a pyramid where the base is bigger than the top, that's a very strong structure. And if you learn how to do geometry with engineering, thank you, Mr. Pythagoras from ancient Greece, about 500 BC or so, you'll realize that something that's built square, if it's framed with a rectangular, it can tip over. But if it's a triangle, it won't. It's solid. It can't tip over. So they put what they either call shear panels, or they put this diagonal bracing in rectangularly framed walls, which totally solids it up. So if any of you've torn open an old house, because nowadays they use plywood shear panels instead of, but you'll see in an old house, they'll have vertical, say 2x4s framing, and then they'll take this diagonal and they'll cut it in a line on an angle in between all the other studs. Or they'll cut in the side of the studs and put one solid one. It's called a let in or set in brace. So it's still flush to the surface for putting on drywall or siding, but it goes all the way down as a triangle, and that makes the thing totally solid. Well, that type of thinking, engineering, planning, calculating, put your human mind to the task of observing, recognizing what the issues are, recognizing where a problem either is or will likely develop. Think about it. Picture if the wind blows. Yeah, but what if the wind blows and there's an earthquake? What if the wind blows, there's an earthquake, and a tree falls? Okay, so engineers who do structural specifications for building are going to plan for a multiple events all at the same time. They didn't used to. So you have an old house like this one, which was built wrong. It'll fall down in one event maybe. But modern code is designed to withstand, to stand up at least long enough for the occupants to escape before the thing really goes down for multiple events. And so the people who have made it their occupation to think and consider and strategize and imagine what would happen if this and that, and at the same time, this other thing. Okay, then let's incorporate that into the demands of the plans. Well, what is all that? That's all wisdom. That's the soundness of an action or a decision. Well, that's humans using their brain to think. And as I've said before, some people think that it's carnal to think, and so a good spiritual man would not be doing that. And as it said in online, with regard to the application of experience, well, that means that if wisdom comes with experience, the application of experience, then young people don't have that wisdom. Now, young people might have some kind of intuition, they might have some kind of an insight, they might have a gut feeling, but they don't have experience. If you listen to your parents or your teachers, you can gain knowledge from other people's experience. But if wisdom by definition has to come through experience, wisdom can't be just gifted to you. Now you can ask of Elohim, give me wisdom, please. What will he give you? We can say those words in English, but what is he actually giving you? According to the definition of wisdom here, he would have to give you, he'd have to, as it were, bless your thinking processes so that your mind can look at a set of things, a set of circumstances in life in the physical realm of here and now and say, hey, wait a minute, there's something going on. What is it? Or something might happen. It's like, I got to drive home and I'm going to have something to drink that is going to, or take some medication that's going to impair my judgment. Yeah, I think I can make it. I better not. So to say, I better not, either because of the experience, well, I don't want to do that again, or it's illegal, or it's unsafe, or I don't want to put me or anybody else at risk. It's just not worth it. Okay, then I remember once seeing a movie a long time ago. I don't even know what movie it is, but these people were in a vehicle out in the middle of Africa somewhere. There was no roads, and it was flat for as many miles as you could see to the horizon in all directions. and they were in some kind of a van or truck or something, but they started the thing up and put a weight on the gas pedal, and it just started going. And they didn't have to attend. It was like on automatic pilot. They didn't have to attend to driving or braking or looking, because they're out in the middle of nowhere. It's completely flat. There's no bumps or pits or things and it's like, they didn't care. It's like, don't you have a destination? Aren't you trying to get to a certain place on the horizon? Apparently not. They were just trying to get from this side somewhere to that side. And it's like, okay, if you don't have a destination in mind, then it doesn't matter if you get there or when you get there or there is no there. So it doesn't matter where you go. So let the car be on autopilot, and it just doesn't matter. Yeah, but if you have no destination, how do you know if you're not already there? Why don't you just turn the car off and say, well, I'm here. Here is the destination. So why? Well, we're on a sense of adventure. Let's just go. Go where? Doesn't matter. Anywhere but here. Okay. Let the car go. Let's see, but that's not using wisdom. Wisdom says, oh, I'm going to employ my thinking based on the goal, based on my intention, based on my experience, my knowledge of the factors, the vehicle, the terrain, the options, time, all the different things that could possibly happen. If I stop and think about those things, well, if I suspect that my thinking ability is not, you might say, up to par, up to snuff, or could be better than it is, that's where praying to say, I need more. I don't, Donald Rumsfeld, I think it was Secretary of Defense or something under President Bush. He had a great talk one time. It sounded goofy, but it was really intelligent. He said, there are known unknowns, there are unknown unknowns, and he had a whole list of these things. There's some things we know we don't know, and there's some things we don't know that we don't know. And when we find them, we'll go, hey, I didn't even know that was possibly even a matter to consider. But the way he articulated it was actually very intelligent, though it sounded, like I say, rather goofy, because you don't normally hear people talk like that. But the people that are in think tanks or heads of state better be thinking about that stuff. That's the kind of thing that is wisdom. The ability to say, if we're going to imagine a scenario, whether we're going to try to accomplish an engineering feat, or we're going to try to engage a campaign, whether it's military or industrial adventure, Lewis and Clark going on expedition, we better consider every single things we know that we don't know certain things. What if we come to a river or a mountain or hostile forces or animals or diseases? Let's take a provision for those things. But then what if we encounter things that we have no idea, like space aliens or something? I mean, it's like, yeah, how do you prepare for that? Well, that's where if you pray ahead and say, hey, Almighty One, who can actually see the future in front of me, both in time and space, you know what I'm going to bump into. Will you please provide me? Have me take with me the necessary accoutrements so that I'll be prepared when that thing happens, whatever it is. There was a particular movie where some guy's handed a briefcase, and it's like, well, okay, what am I supposed to do with this? Well, just take it. And then later, he's sitting in a taxi cab, and the taxi cab actually runs off the pier and into the water, and it's going down. And he goes to open the window of the taxi so he can get out, and there's no door handle. And it's like, and it's going down deeper and deeper. And somehow he thinks, oh, open the briefcase, and there's the door handle, the window crank in the briefcase. And it's like, what the heck? How did the window crank to the window of that taxi cab, end up in the briefcase that he was given by somebody else a long time before, having nothing to do. Nobody knew that he was going to get in that taxi cab. That was a decision. What is going on? But he used it to roll down the window so that he could dive out and swim up to air. Well, that's the kind of provision that if you pray and ask Elohim to help us prepare ahead of time for the unknown unknowns, and then hope that he says, sure. But then when he says in Proverbs, if you don't listen to my voice, I can't hear your voice. It's like, what does that even mean? I don't hear him saying anything. I read the Bible, and so I guess I hear his voice. Okay, let's just run the program. And then you find yourself languishing without provisions and going, well, I prayed for a provision, so it's got to be around here somewhere. Yeah, but he said if you don't listen to his voice, how do you listen to the voice of Elohim? And in specifically, not just any Elohim, but Yahweh Zavot, the Elohim of Israel, who himself said, if you, speaking to Israel, do not listen to my voice, I can't and won't hear your prayers. That's the word Gimel Mem, which is Gam, which is back at you, even so reciprocal mirror action. You don't listen to my voice, I don't listen to your voice. That's the way it works. You want me to hear your voice, you listen to my voice. That's the way the universe is built. If you're Israel, but what if you're not Israel? Will he or can he hear the voice of other people who are not Israel? See, now you have to back up and say, well, wait a second. Is the Torah for everybody or not? And this is a debatable perspective. But for me, I would look at Exodus 20, where he spoke the 10 commandments. And the first thing, Exodus 20, verse 1, it says, Anoki Yahweh Eloheka. I am Yahweh, your Elohim. Is Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, Yahuwah, your Elohim? And if he's not, okay, nothing else he says is to you. That's my take on it. So when he says, don't work on the seventh day, my Elohim got nothing to do with me. Okay, then work on the seventh day if you want. Go ahead. Then he furthers it and says, I just took you. Who's you? Whoever he's referring to, he says, I just took you out of the house of slavery, out of Egypt. Egypt is Mitzarim, Mem Zadi Resh Yod Mem. Yod Mem suffix is plural. Mem prefix means the place of, and Zadi Resh, Zar, is a rock, or like being crushed between rocks, or millstones, being the grain crushed between millstones, or as the proverbial between a rock and a hard place, like the place called the Narrows in Zion National Park in Utah. They get narrower and narrower and narrower. Yeah, it's really close, and there's a place for a creek. Boy, if a flash flood comes, it fills up in a big hurry. If you're in there, you're in heap of trouble. But the idea that you're being squeezed into this narrowing, it's almost like a birth canal concept. So for Israel to be in Egypt until it was their time of release, of birthing, and then they were shot, they were, get out of here. Lekah, you, go, get out. At the Exodus, in the days of Moshe. That's why it's called Mitzrayim, not Egypt. It's the place of oppression, but you're like a mem, you're incubating in this pond, in this womb, in this place of oppression until it gets too confining and you gotta break loose, like a chick developing within an egg. That memnoon, 40-50, that's manna, that's what? Where's this come from? What's happening? Where's this beyond, from and beyond? And so when you realize there's these pictures and stories, there's these words, and then there's the numbers associated with the letters, it all fits. Shavuot, Memnoon, the festival of counting, like being pregnant and giving birth. And so 50 is Jubilee, which is the number Noon. Noon jumps out of Mem. Mem is 40, and human gestation is 40 weeks of pregnancy. So, I mean, so if you're thinking about all these things, and it's like, well, how do I memorize all this stuff? It's not necessarily that you got to memorize it. It's just there as reference of saying, hey, look, it looks like it fits. Another thing that was online, it says, knowing what's good for you and applying it, doing so. So if you know, or you've been taught by somebody what's good for you, and you go, yeah, well, no, I'm not going to do it. I don't care if it's good for me or not. Smoking, drinking, cussing, whatever you think you want to do because it feels like you ought to at the moment. Somebody says, that's not good for you. And you say, shut up. You conduct your life. I'll do it my way. Well, by definition, that's not wisdom, because wisdom is, though you have other inclinations, doing what's good for you because you have learned, which is knowing. So in other words, it's not somebody's guess. It's not just, yeah, well, maybe, whatever. No, it's knowing that something is. So that's the facts. That's da'at. Dalit ayin, or dalit ayin tav, is to know something. H2O is water. There's 2 atoms of hydrogen to 1 atom of oxygen, and they bond together electromagnetically, and you've got a molecule of water. Well, so what? That's chemistry. Yeah, but if you want to make water, then and you got hydrogen and oxygen, you can do so. Or if you need one of the 2 gases of hydrogen or oxygen, you have water, you can boil it or break it apart, and it'll give you those 2 gases. What I'm saying is, that's the way the universe is built. So knowledge has to do with, what are the facts? How is this place built? How did Elohim build the universe? Chemistry, mathematics, and physics, what I would call the hard sciences. And then you get application to those things in biology. And then you get the more, call them woo-woo sciences of philosophy and psychology and sociology. It's like, when I say woo-woo, immaterial. And the more you learn about those, the more you realize, oh, they're absolute. They're just as solid as mathematics and chemistry and physics. But because we just don't know, or we don't think about that, we think, well, especially spiritual, it's like, well, there's a lot of religions. And it's like, but they're not all true. They're not all right. They're not all accurate. People think they're accurate, and then they inherit traditions, and they inherit customs, and they inherit. Well, why do we do this? Well, because our ancestors did. Give me that old time religion. It was good enough for Uncle Joe. It's good enough for me. Yeah, but is it accurate? Doesn't matter. It was good enough for Uncle Joe, so it's good enough for me. Give me that old time religion. Give me that old time religion. That's a famous song from back when. And it's like, well, now, if you go back to the word kadem, kuf dalet mem, has to do with the ancient path. And if you go back far enough to the, you might say, the heart, the relationship with Abraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov, okay. It seems to me that the way I read the scripture, that when it talks about go back to the ancient path, it's referring to them. So every time Yahuwah refers to himself as, it's typically not the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. It's the Elohim of Abraham, the Elohim of Yitzhak, and the Elohim of Yaakov. So it's phrased differently. It's not just the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. The Elohim of Abraham, the Elohim of Yitzhak, the Elohim of Yaakov, the Elohim of Moshe, the Elohim of David, my Elohim. It makes it very personal to think that way. So what I found is that if we change the way we think by changing the way we speak according to the way things are written, it's going to affect the structuring of you might say, the neural synapses in our brain, hardwired physiology And so I'd heard many years ago that you might say the neurons, or the way that things work in your brain is like a thick forest. And just like in a forest, animals will find the best route to go from point A to point B, from here to the water source, or up the side of the mountain to a food source, or to escape. They'll find the best path. Maybe a rabbit will find the way, and then the deer will walk on that path and wear it through a number of times. And so if the human comes along, it's like, we'll find the deer trail. It's probably the best route to take. And then the more you walk, the more the trail is laid in there. You step down and things don't grow and branches are bent, knocked out of the way. Your brain works the same way. There was someone speaking on TED Talks a few years ago, and she said, if you do something for 20 minutes, if you do the same thing for 20 minutes, it'll hardwire, it'll blaze a path of neural synapses that make connections in your brain. I was listening to somebody the other day, I think it was that Barbara O'Neill, she said it takes 21 days. Now, whether that's the same study that one said it was minutes and the other one said it was days, I don't know. Or maybe there's two different types of hardwiring. One, it becomes a fixture in your mind. What the person on TED Talks was saying years ago was that when you do something for 20 minutes, repeating the same thing. So if you're practicing the piano, if you're practicing a tennis swing or some kind of archery, if you do it wrong and practice that, that's going to blaze the trail. But if you force yourself to hold your hand just right when you're holding the tennis racket, or if you're reading or you're thinking a certain thing, if you force yourself to think correctly for 20 minutes, certain synapses will disappear, which are contrary, and other ones will become like that deer trail blazed. And if you do it for 21 days straight, what Barbara O'Neill said was that will become a habit locked in, which will then take years to break. And someone else I heard said, if you do something that becomes a habit, it'll stay there for like 7 years, even if it's not used. If it is used, it's rebuilt, restructured, made more solid. And if it's not used, after 7 years, it'll be decommissioned and disintegrate. Some vestiges, like finding architectural ruins of some previous culture, you might stumble across that in the woods or somewhere, and that's kind of like previous behavior patterns in our mind. So if you want to change your mind, change your thinking, change your behavior, change your responses to various stimuli, you could say, I can't help myself. That's just what I do. No, you can help yourself. If you tell yourself, I can't help myself, you're looking for an easy cop-out. And it may be painful, it may be difficult, it may feel impossible, but according to the way the human brain is built, do the right thing. Force yourself, tell yourself, control yourself to do the right thing. And even if it's gently, one little baby steps, as they say, one step at a time, just doing the right thing, saying the right words, thinking the right thoughts, sustained for 20 minutes, sustained for 21 days, you will change physiologically. In fact, the lady on TED Talks that was, I can't recall her name, she said, okay, because she's going to be talking about this subject for 20 minutes, she said, to the audience, she said, when you walked in, you all had a mind of whatever the structure of your brain was, such and whatever it was. But now that you've all been thinking about this stuff that I'm talking about for 20 minutes, when you leave, you will physiologically, structurally, physically be a different person than you were when you walked in. Unless you were daydreaming and weren't listening, then it wouldn't matter. But it's interesting then to say, as we're learning this Hebrew language, this Ivrit, For it to be called the Shafah Kodesh, the sacred tongue, the set apart exclusively, not like any other, and that the word Shafah doesn't just mean lip language or tongue, as does the word Shana, Shin Nun He, which also means lip language or tongue, but it also means to change and variant and to hate, which is to say something's oppositional and conflicting. Shafah, Shin Pei He, the Kadosh Shafah of Ivrit, means to sweep bare, like to clear the path, to clear the trail, to bring back to sanity, to cure from lunacy. Now, what if we could actually believe that that's true? What if we could actually take into consideration the possibility in our mind, if we could accept as a possible imaginary story and from La La Land somewhere, that if you learn Hebrew, something about learning Hebrew, and it's not just Hebrew, it's got to be Shafah Kadesh Hebrew. It's got to be the sacred sanity of mind Hebrew. Well, that's got to be the way Yahuwah thinks, because even Yahusha said, hey, I'm not here on my own agenda. I'm saying nothing of my own volition. Yahusha said, I only say the things I hear my Father saying, and I only do the things I see my Father doing. If he had any personal compunction to, I'd like to heal you, but my dad won't let me. I can't. It's like, what? Whatever he felt like doing, he didn't do. He only did what he saw his Father doing. So if we were to take on that kind of mind, under the illusion that if we did so, you have those people years ago had that little wrist thing that said WWJD, what would Jesus do? I remember my wife said, well, he'd probably use his own name, like Yeshua instead of Jesus. That's one thing he'd do. Well, if he's only speaking what he hears his Father saying, and if his Father has ordained or has established or built confirming that Hebrew was the Shafah Kodesh, wouldn't he be speaking Hebrew? So when Mel Gibson's film Passion had him speaking Aramaic, and other people say, look, he was speaking Greek, and it's like, well, whatever. He might have known a bunch of languages. Maybe he even spoke Latin to the Romans. I don't know, but I'm gonna choose to believe. I'm just gonna choose to believe that because Hebrew, see, there's a reason. It's not just me and my attitude. So with wisdom is the soundness of a decision. Because, see, there's the reason. There's the sound reason. Because Hebrew is Shafah Kadosh, unlike any other language on the face of the earth, it makes sense that Yahusha would be speaking Hebrew. So I hold within my own self that though he might have spoken Aramaic, if he was telling jokes with his buds on the walking down the dirt path, no, wait a minute. He says, I only say the things I hear my Father saying. So was he that kind of a prankster that he'd just be goofing around? I don't know. But especially when it comes to the serious stuff that matters, got to be Hebrew. He might have spoken Aramaic, Greek, Latin, any other language. Doesn't make sense to me. He would have to be speaking Hebrew. That's the Shafah Kodesh. So am I trying to make use of experience, knowledge, and good judgment? So for me to ponder these matters, according to the definition, that's trying to use human thinking, percolating of thoughts, which is by definition wisdom. Another definition said the ability to see beyond the material world and understand connectedness of all things. So if somebody says, well, I think it would be most expedient if we just do this, like when I was talking to the governor of Oregon at that meeting, and I said, well, we're here, Christians and Jews meeting together. Don't you think it would be a good idea to invoke the attention of the Almighty? Well, got to be a little more pragmatic. It's like, you're not talking to a bunch of heathens and infidels. You're talking to the two greatest groups of believers on the planet. Why not ask him? Gosh, because they don't believe. Just because they represent a group doesn't mean they believe, doesn't mean they take it to heart. But to say, I understand that there is a necessary connection, an absolute weaving of the affairs of man with the concerns of heaven. And that not only the concerns of heaven, but the forces, the zavot of Yahweh. He has angel armies. He has various types that he can send in to intervene or to make stuff happen on the face of the earth if his people ask him, if his people listen to his voice, if his people turn their hearts to him. But if they say, yeah, we're trying to be pragmatic, apparently we don't then understand the interweaving connectiveness. Or if we are doing something on the earth and we think, well, nobody will see me if I do this. You think you get away with anything? Yahuwah, as it says that his throne is established on Mishpat and Zadokah. Mishpat, balanced scales. Whatever happens is going to come back. So Zadokah, righteousness, but it's also victory, deliverance, and salvation. So what he's saying is, if you're righteous, you get the victory. If you do something sneaky, weaselly, kind of corrupt, nobody's seeing me, so I'm going to say, it's like, you're going to fail. That's the way it's built. If you think you can break the system, you're unwise, you're an idiot, you're wrong. You're a fool. To think you can work against the system of what the Creator built in the invisible connectiveness of all things. When he says he ensures, and I don't think I'd ever quite heard this, and all of a sudden one time when I was reading, I saw that Yahweh says that he returns a man's way upon his own head. And it's like, well, it's kind of familiar. And yeah, okay, well, what goes around comes around. It's, yeah, sowing and reaping and karma. And it's like, no, wait a minute. Those are all variations of the same thing. But specifically, he tests the depth, plumbs, fathoms a man's heart. How does he do that? With circumstances. He allows us to bump into circumstances where we have to decide to do something. How are you going to treat that homeless guy? How are you going to treat that person who's mouthing off? How are you going to discipline your child or your friend's child who's doing something offending you, offending your property? How are you going to do that? Who are you? How do you conduct yourself with respecting other people? How do you treat creation? It's like, wow. So apparently Elohim's business, not just sitting up there watching it all play out like we're a human ant farm or something, a human fishbowl. They're just swimming back and forth doing their thing. No, he's constantly determining who are we. Well, he's determining who we are by allowing us to determine who we are by our own actions, our own thoughts, our own motives. And then his job is to see to it that our own ways are brought back on our own head. Good for good, evil for evil. Victory for righteousness, failure for wickedness. Sooner or later, but absolutely positively. And if we don't get that, we're either ignorant or fools, or we have a heart of wickedness so that we've blinded and deafened ourselves to be able to hear. That's the way this place is built. So wisdom then has to start by understanding that. Understanding that not only humans are on the earth, not to be just fish in a bowl, ants in their tunnels for somebody else's spectator sport, but we're here every moment engaged in a, not just an experiment, but actually a proving, a testing. Who are you? Who are you going to be? And whatever you have decided for yourself, you're going to wear it not only for the rest of your life, unless you change your behavior, change your thinking, but you're going to wear this for eternity. Remember, the caterpillar model, like the Vav man, who eats green leaves or whatever, starts off as a little caterpillar, turns into a big caterpillar, eats whatever it's going to eat, pulls in whatever it's going to assimilate and pull into itself. And it's like, okay, you ready? Now you're going to crawl into a place, build a chrysalis, and cease being a caterpillar. That's kind of like going to the grave. And whatever that caterpillar had eaten, and if it was a wrong plant it shouldn't have eaten, it's like, too bad for you, caterpillar. It's now going to become part of you when that caterpillar becomes a butterfly and comes out of the chrysalis. Same creature, looks different. Instead of crawling on the ground, it's flying. Instead of chewing on leaves, it's now drinking nectar from flowers. Everything in the Resh mode, Vav man, Resh man, caterpillar type, butterfly type. If the word or, light, Aleph Vav Resh, were to look at this and say, the plan is for the human individual to be given an Aleph, a self, a consciousness, a being, a present being within the realm of eternity, of which time and space are simply constraints for the Vav duration. The duration of the Vav experience in time and space is a limiter that when we go through this veil of this time of death, like the caterpillar in the chrysalis, unto the Resh realm, we are who we determined to be by the decisions we made while we were in the Vav caterpillar state. So therefore, every decision we make now and there's where I would say, even if we learn one word, learn his name, too hard for me to say Yahuwah, ain't gonna do it. Good Lord was good enough for Uncle Joe, it's good enough for Granny, it's good enough for me. Okay, you're taking that with you to the grave and the beyond. What gets filtered out? Who knows? Remember when Yahusha rose from the dead, the people that had been with him and saw his face and talked with him didn't recognize him. They didn't even know it was him. Other people did know it was him because, well, hey, he said something that sounded just like what he said before. Recognized a voice print? He said to Thomas, here, stick your finger in the holes in my hand. Some stuff gets through, some stuff doesn't. So death is like this filter. But it's our occasion now to take advantage of every single day, every moment, every thought. We can stack the deck. We can load the truck. You talk about you want to be a prepper. Instead of prepping for some impending doom, some political or environmental calamity, prepare for the event of your death. Every word you learn, every heart attitude you hold on to, every attitude towards your neighbor, your enemy, your friend, the attitude towards Yahweh's word and his scripture, the attitude that we have of his Torah, every one of those things is unto eternity. Wow, every day is an opportunity to, like I say, load the truck, stack the deck, put bullet shells into your bandolier, load up for what's coming next when you're in the Resh zone. Another definition of wisdom was tapping into God's wisdom to meet the need. No, wait, that's a whole different thing. tapping into God's wisdom to meet the need. So part of this definition of wisdom, these people are saying is, if I'm here and I don't know what the heck is going on, it's like, hey, you, can you give me some insight here? You know, the light shines. Oh, good. Okay, now I've got some insight that I couldn't have had. They're saying that's wisdom. It's like, that's a different type of wisdom. If it is even wisdom, divine intervention, divine enlightenment, but they're calling it wisdom. So now we go, wait a second. Certain things are, but they're not. And it's like, so where's the real definition of the word? Another one said, learn to master the principles of being guided by the Spirit. That would be wisdom. And it's like, learn to master the principles of being guided by the Spirit. Master the principles of guided by the Spirit. Well, if you're guided by the Spirit, you're listening on the inside. Hey, go over here. What? Why should I go over there? I'm not sure, but I'm guided by the Spirit. I think I'll go over here. It's like, is that the way it works? Is that wisdom? Maybe a wise man will do that. But see, if wisdom is using your head, thinking, calculating, based on experience, what's being guided by the Spirit? Well, that's kind of a whole different thing that a wise man will do. But is that based on understanding, or should there be a different word for that? If you look at Proverbs 9, verse 1, it says, wisdom has established her house based on 7 pillars. And then there's this one site that said, and here's the 7 pillars. One is Yirah Yahweh, which is fear God. The next one was Torah, which is instruction. Next one was knowledge. Next one was Bina, understanding. Next one was discretion. Well, discretion is being able to choose. I would throw that into the realm of Shakil, I think. Next one was counsel. Well, there's this word spelled ayin zadi hey, which means to be able to take counsel, or you don't take counsel and your eyes become like wood. Ayin zadi is also the word for tree, or to lignify, be like petrifies, turn to stone, lignifies, turn to wood. And then they said reproof. Well, the word reproof is mosar, mem vav samik resh, which also means correction, discipline, ethics, fetter, bond, or rein, like reins on a horse to guide it, or fetters, chains. And remember, there's this church called East Hill up here in Gresham in Portland, Oregon. There's this beautiful tapestry that somebody had made, huge thing out in the foyer of these chains breaking. And you go, yeah, you know, our God breaks the chains. Wait a minute, but Yahweh uses this word mosar, which is chain, fetter, bond, as if it was a positive thing, and says, if you're going to be a wise man, you better allow yourself to be controlled, chained, fettered under the reins of his Torah, his ethics, responsibilities of righteous Zadik thinking and behavior. Not just break the chains of sin and death, maybe, but certainly not just breaking chains. For somebody to have just a picture of breaking chains, which is this beautiful graphic. See, I would say for the simple-minded, oh yeah, how wonderful. But then the more I start to read scripture, it's like, that's wrong. Maybe we should swap the chains. But if you try to break off or shove off, shirk Yahuwah's Mosar, you're in a heap of trouble. Because you're going to do stupid things. You're going to do unwise things. And expect him to just get you out of it, which is not the way this place is built. Mosar has to be based on the things disclosed by Yahuwah's own personal voice. And then, looking a little closer in Proverbs 9:11, it's like, those 7 things aren't listed as the pillars of wisdom. In fact, it doesn't even say pillars of wisdom are specifically, and you look at the rabbinical commentary in Stone's Tanakh, and it says, well, 7 is just this metaphorical number for completion. What? For perfection? And it's like, Is it 7 pillars or is it not 7 pillars? Well, it's up for grabs. 5 minutes. And you realize, gosh, as you look on some of these sites and you think, I'm reading facts and figures and truth. No, you're not. You're reading sermons. You're reading people's thinking. Look at Proverbs 3:13-20. Blessed are those who find wisdom, those who gain understanding. Find wisdom. Well, how do you find wisdom? Think about that. Blessed are those who find wisdom. Is wisdom just laying around? No, wisdom has to be calculated by experience, figured out, learned. Is that Shakil or is that Chachma? Those who gain Bina. Just ask, he'll give it to you. Maybe that's not the way it works. Maybe the human has to say, just as much as if I want to get big and strong, I'm going to do push-ups and sit-ups and lift weights and run. I've got to exercise my mind. What? Why didn't they tell us this? Gain understanding. How? By trying to understand. Can you try to understand? How do you do that? Think, ponder, meditate, consider. What the hell? Think and ask for guidance, for insight, for enlightenment, this is an active sport. This is active. Proverbs 9:10, Yirah Yahweh is the beginning of wisdom. There, the fear of Yahuwah is the beginning of wisdom. Okay, so we're going to take a break and we'll jump into something about that. Yirah Yahweh as the beginning of wisdom.